Hi, this is Tobias White, and welcome back to Illustrating Spooks, Part 2, The Finish. After the rough, we head on to adjustments and fleas. What I mean by fleas is that there's this little saying that was said by a famous artist a long time ago. I wish I could remember his name, but he said, paint the dog before you paint the fleas. Well, in the last video, I painted the dog, which means I painted the basic structure, got all my color in that I wanted to use so that my entire canvas was my palette. So now I'm in here adding in some fleas, some detail. And you can see in here that I like to take full advantage of Photoshop's ability to transform. And so I do some of these details on a different layer, and I copy them if there's going to be any kind of symmetry on my character or in any kind of illustration I'm doing, so that I can reuse it so it looks correct. I don't have to do any kind of guessing, and since I did it the first time, I don't really feel bad about using it. Time is money in the illustrating business, so I'm perfectly fine with that. So what I'm doing here is I'm going in and I'm adding in some more detail. I'm cleaning up, really. I'm adding some detail, I'm cleaning it up, and I'm making sure that that it's going to be everything that I need for the final finish when I do the final details. Now you can see here that there's quite a bit of a little cleanup, because there's still a lot of remnant of my sketches from the last video that I did. And one of the things is that when I was doing this, I've been playing around with my procedures of how to do cleanup, and I kind of started off in a shaky ground right here. But later on, I discovered a different way of doing my cleanup a little bit easier, to where I have created a copy of my layer and that had sketches, and a layer that didn't have sketches, and I slowly removed while painting on another layer above that. It sounds a little complicated, but it really isn't. So when I'm in this stage, it's pretty fun. I really like it, because not only have I seen it come to life before, but now I'm cleaning it up and it's making it all look nice. And every time I hit a little highlight or deepen a shadow, and I see it popping, or making it feel more 3D, it really makes it enjoyable. And when I'm doing this, I'm often playing some kind of playlist from my iTunes. So you can see here that I'm adding in little shadows to make that detail in the armor pop out more, to have it kind of an erased, I don't know what you would call it. I think you would call it like a decal or scroll work. And I'll go through here and I'll make several different adjustments. Now you notice that I adjusted his cape from before, and often we'll go back between several layers to make some of these adjustments. So you can see you can go into a lot of detail. So now here is one of Nathan's characters that actually appears quite frequently in several different role-playing games he played. It's a character called Miss Priss, and the way he described it to me was a fast-talking, eager to please, tripping over oneself merchant. And I really had a lot of fun coming up with her design and working on her in general, because she really came out looking quite iconic. Now right here, when I'm working on hair, Uh, I used to struggle with big time. I thought that I had to do every single strand, and one of the things that I learned is that I just have to give the impression that there's a lot of strands on whoever I'm giving hair to. And so you see, it's really just kind of broad strokes. But later on, I'll add a few individual single strands. So in the viewer's mind, it might look like there's a lot of single strands everywhere, but there really isn't. It's just the way our brains work, and that's something I've always been kind of interested in. How our brains work visually, and so I always like to watch all those Nova, National Geographic shows. Plus, I always try to keep updated on science sites on the internet. So here we're back at the ragdoll, and I'm really kind of giving the same treatment for the hair. And in this case, like instead of last time where I was removing a lot of those sketchy marks, I was leaving those purposely in because that added texture and more detail into the hair. So it does, in a way, it does look like there's a whole bunch of different strands. So, and this character is, of course, based off of Sally from A Nightmare Before Christmas, just in loose concept. But while she was a corpse, this is actually a doll. And I added that. I wanted to add a little bit more character, make her a little bit more sad. Um, she's also a little bit of cross between Coraline with the button eyes. But I didn't want her just to be cutesy, I want her to have a little bit of sex appeal. And like I mentioned before, I really like those Chinese dresses. And considering that we have a Victorian style going. So now we're in texture and polish. And so what I do is that when I'm going through with my camera outdoors, I'm often taking photographs of various textures that I come across, whether it's on a tree, a sidewalk, a car, and I overlay this over my artwork and set it to either a multiply mode, a soft light mode, or and there's so many various modes. There's vivid light, and I have to really play with it and make adjustments. But I place that over what I want to texture, and it gives me a starting point to making something look like something else. And often you'd think that, like, if I wanted to add wood to the mannequin character here, that I would, use wood. Well, that's not always the case. I might find a texture that's from a metal, rusty metal or something like that, and when I overlay it, it'll end up looking like wood. And the best part of finding these textures, if you're an artist yourself, is that nowadays most people have pretty good phones that take decent photos, and so keeping that in mind, always picking up and creating a library is a great thing to do. And you see right here, I'm using a tool called Puppet Warp to change the dimensions of not the dimensions, but how the texture I have just laid on works, so I can make it look like it flows correctly over it. And it's one of my favorite tools, and I'm not impressed with CS6. I'm using CS5 here, and you can see that. I don't know if you noticed it, but I was going through all my library textures, and there's quite a bit. I have like over 2 gigabytes worth of textures right here, and I also use it to dirty up things because in life, things are not always typically clean. So, like I was saying before, you know, take that phone with you and start building up your texture. So now I'm in the cleanup operation. And so after I've put down all my textures and I've erased the bits that I didn't want, I go and I start adding and removing, modifying what I just did. And I use that as a basis, and I find that once I have that texture in place, I can modify the texture to how exactly I want it because I can emulate what I see right there and then. It takes a lot of the guesswork out, and like I said, this is one of the things that in being a freelance illustrator is that I have to do it. So video editing and art and narration was all done by me. Music was done by Simon Wilkinson and licensed by Nathan Mayer for the game Spooks. Thank you for watching.